Men and women all over the globe are joining now for the best videos on the internet.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
And I'm doing my part too.
They're doing their part. Are you? Click the subscribe button now to become a member of the Action Pack. Would you like to know more?
Hello everyone and welcome. Not that long ago, there was a game released in the Souls-like genre that I really enjoyed. It did so well that it got itself a sequel, which is the subject of today's video. But before we continue, there is just one question. Are you strong enough in the Force to survive? I'm Mike, and this is Mike's After Action Reviews, and this is the After Action Review for Jedi Survivor. Are you a gym rat, or even just somebody who works to stay healthy through exercise? If so, I have found your new favorite color. Purple. Purple Works Nutrition offers a pre-workout manufactured right here in the good old US of A. Their pre-workout is formulated by a healthcare professional with a simple, easy-to-understand list of all natural ingredients with no preservatives or artificial flavors. Action Pack members, in the words of the mighty Grom Hellscream, why be strong enough when you can be stronger still? By harnessing the power of Purple. Purple Works Pre-Workout is the ultimate pre-workout supplement that targets tried and true ingredients that deliver energy, focus, and strength. You can find this pre-workout at purpleworksnutrition.com. You can find a link in the description down below. Starting off with the game's production. Star Wars Jedi Survivor was released on April 28, 2023. The game was developed by Respawn Entertainment, most well known for the Titanfall series from 2014 to 2016, respectively, and most recently having done Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order from 2019. The game was published by Electronic Arts, most well known for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order in 2019, and having released Wild Hearts in 2023. The music was by Stephen Barton, most well known for Star Trek Picard from 2023 and having worked on Multiverses in 2022, and Gordy Hobb, most well known for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order in 2019 and also having worked on Multiverses in 2022. Moving on to the game's story. This game continues the story of Cal Kestis, set 5 years after the first game. Cal, now a Jedi Knight, has continued his rebel fight against the Empire, but the resources of your enemies appear endless, and the hope for victory is beginning to dwindle. It does not seem like there is a way to escape the ever-present death march of the Emperor's stormtroopers, or his greatest agent of death and destruction, Lord Vader himself. But when a myth offers a slim chance at rebuilding what once was, the hope in Cal Kestis' heart is ignited once more. We learn that the team from Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order has disbanded, having left Cal to pilot the Mantis himself and find a new crew. We start the game off on Coruscant, with Cal having been captured. From here we are introduced to the new members of the team as we make our escape. Having such a close encounter with the Empire is not without consequences, though. The Mantis is damaged, and with few allies left in the galaxy, you must call upon some old friends to help you in your journey. After being reunited with some friendly faces, you find evidence that supports the rumors of a lost, near impossible to reach planet, Tanalorr. And here is where our journey truly begins. If Tanalorr is more than just a myth, Cal and his allies would hope to reach it and use it as a sanctuary from the tyrannical government that rules the galaxy. The Empire would have no way of finding or reaching this hidden planet. Here, a new Jedi Order could be built, and those who wish to escape the Empire would find refuge. The story is where the game diverts from the first quite a bit. While Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order focused largely on fighting the Empire and escaping the Inquisitors, Jedi Survivor instead seems like a detour on the road to defeating Vader and the Emperor. The whole story is about finding Tanalorr. This makes sense because of what its strategic value would be, but this may not be what players were expecting. I personally thought we would follow Kestis and crew on different adventures as they sabotaged assets in the government's war machine, helped other Jedi escape genocide, or worked with rebels to defend the innocent. I am not saying that we got a story that was, inherently the wrong story to tell, but Cal has made a name for himself as a terrorist amongst Empire loyalists, and playing through that portion of the story seemed like the logical next step for us to take with the character after the first game. Without spoiling it, I will tell you that you will be facing different threats than the Empire this time around, and although they are present, Vader and his troopers are not your primary enemies. Another major difference between the two game storytelling styles is that, in the first game, flashback sequences were featured heavily and used as tutorials to learn new abilities. This only happens twice here in the sequel, and I will say that this does make somewhat sense for there to be less development of the main character, because in the first game he was relearning how to use his Jedi abilities. I will applaud the developers here because, again without spoiling anything, I can say that as far as I can see, the story is lore-friendly and fits nicely into the greater timeline of events in the Star Wars universe. The story is also left open for another sequel if Respawn decides to continue the journey in the future. One criticism that I do have is that while it is necessarily left open, there are some plot strands that are going to need some more explanation in the future. These issues are not game-breaking and may be resolved in a sequel, but it is not best practices to show players something in a game that is then never talked about again in that same game. So all the main characters from the first game return for the journey here in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. There is our ever-present droid, BD-1, who serves as a type of navigator, much like the fairy Navi from the Legend of Zelda game series. BD-1 is also instrumental in solving some puzzles throughout the game. Marin is a Night Sister from Dathomir whose Force magic is heavily featured in the game, and whose friendship with Cal Kestis is explored further this time around. Jedi Master Seer Junda serves as a mentor for Cal and guide in the ways of the Force. Grease Dritus is the owner of Pyloon Saloon, which serves as the game's hub where players can chat with NPCs, purchase gear from vendors, play a tactical minigame for rewards, and even garden.
Got new seeds?
Grease is also the owner of the Mantis, and although he is at times fearful and anxious, serves as its daring pilot. There also are new allies introduced in this entry to Cal's story. Bodokuna is a roguish gunslinger mercenary who joins the crew to fight for a better world for his daughter. And finally, Scuva Sten does not join you on the Mantis, but is a prominent NPC that you find throughout the game hunting down exotic fish. If you take the time to talk to him, he will tell you entertaining stories about his rise to almost legendary status as a fisherman from a young age. According to HowLongToBeat.com, playing through Star Wars Jedi Survivor takes about 19.5 hours to complete when focusing only on the main story. Completionists will take on average around 54 hours to 100% to complete the game. While the game is not a traditionally open world, you can explore all the areas that you have unlocked. On your first go-around, certain areas will be inaccessible, but as you play through the campaign, you will get abilities, such as upgrades to BD-1 that allow him to open more advanced doors, that will allow you to go back and open barriers. Side missions come in the form of rumors heard from NPCs throughout the game. These usually involve killing a certain enemy or exploring a particular area. There are also many collectible cosmetics to find, challenges to discover, and secret mini-bosses to defeat, with ancient Jedi meditation chambers that serve as puzzle dungeons being of particular note. So, moving on to the game's core gameplay mechanic, combat. The combat in Star Wars Jedi Survivor is an excellent expansion of the combat from Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. For one thing, Jedi Survivor has a total of 5 fighting stances as opposed to Fallen Order's 2. There is the balanced single blade stance. The double blade stance had high energy attacks, good for crowd control. The dual wield stance focuses on high damage through quick attacks. The blaster stance gives you access to ranged attacks, and my personal favorite, the crossguard stance uses slower, heavier attacks and has increased stamina for blocking. At meditation points throughout the game, you may select 2 stances to equip and switch between at will during combat. I really liked the diverse moveset presented in the game. My only regret is that we were not able to equip more of the stances at one time. I think that it would have been particularly nice to be able to use the blaster pistol whenever you like, rather than only when you have equipped it in one of your stance slots. This game, like its predecessor, is a Souls-like at its core. The gameplay and mechanics are designed, much like others of this genre, to be challenging to skilled players and punishing to noobs. Although you do have the option to turn down the difficulty if you just want to experience the story. This makes this more of a Souls-light than a true Souls-like. Timing your attacks, blocks, dodges, and abilities is crucial to your survival as you explore the world around you, because taking a hit will deal substantial damage, even from weaker enemies. If you die, all your experience towards your character's next level will be lost, but can be regained by respawning, progressing back through the level, and landing a hit on the enemy that killed you. This is an interesting twist on the Souls-like genre, rather than, having to just pick up whatever souls or experience or whatever that you left from your body on the ground. My biggest complaint about the combat in this game, along with other Souls-like games, is the getting stuck in your animation mechanic. Games of this genre are often called more realistic because in real life you would not be able to take more than maybe 1 or 2 hits from a sword before dying, and I agree with this, but I would also contend that within the world of Star Wars, or even Elden Ring for that matter, it makes no sense that as I swing a weapon, I am unable to change direction of my swing to block an incoming attack, or just jump out of the way for that matter. This makes the game more about memorizing your enemy's attacks and timing yours accordingly than being about high-speed attacks and deflections or dodges. I really did enjoy the combat a lot, though. I just wanted to point out that games like Ghost of Tsushima, the Arkham series, and Spider-Man for the PS4 are fun because of the immersion created by the ability of your character to strike, deflect, and dodge incoming attacks as effectively as a samurai, fantasy vigilante, or superhero would realistically be able to do. This would logically also apply to a superhuman Jedi. You'll have to forgive me, I don't mean to rag on this game's combat, which, like I said, was very fun, but we must talk about issues with the difficulty. I do not mean the fact that the game is generally challenging, but instead that the difficulty in the game is inconsistent. In the first few hours, you can encounter a Rancor in a side mission. This fight was extremely difficult at the level that I was when I completed it, and I died multiple times, but it was fun and seemed fair considering how large and powerful Rancor are, and where they fit in the lore of Star Wars as a whole. Then shortly after this, you encounter the spawn of Ogdo. While progressing the main story, this is by far the greatest difficulty spike I have encountered in a while, and one of the cheapest bosses I have ever beaten. He has 6 attacks, 4 of which are unblockable, and 1 is an extremely difficult to dodge guaranteed kill. The problem isn't the difficulty per se, but that the fight feels cheap because of its odd mechanics. It pauses the story's momentum, and is also by far the most powerful boss in the game. You can skip the spawn of Ogdo, that is fair enough, but the fact that it is more difficult to defeat than any of the Dark Force users or giant robots that you will encounter is ridiculous. It should also be noted that later bosses in the game have interesting mechanics, but in my opinion, were by far not difficult enough when compared to standard combat encounters. I played on the standard difficulty and felt that as a Jedi, basic enemies were giving me a realistic challenge, but the bosses, other than Spawn of Ogdo, seemed too far below my level, especially when you consider the lore surrounding them. Later in the game, you get to play as Seer Junda for a level and wield the power of a true Jedi Master. This was an exhilarating and fun experience that does a good job of pushing the power progression along and furthering players' power fantasies. After this, Cal gains the ability to power himself up with the Force for short periods of time after a meter fills up during combat. I really like this power progression for the character and hope to see more of this moving forward. It would be very cool for the next game to show us a Master Kestis doing some ridiculous things with the Force, maybe like what we saw in the Star Wars Clone Wars animated series. So, moving on to the game's special features. Let's start off with the world itself. There are 6 planets that you will explore as you progress through the game. The game's environments are much more open than in the first game, with collectibles, challenges, mini-bosses, and power-ups that offer increases to health, Force Essence, and XP scattered around each of the explorable planets. I am torn by the world here because I really do appreciate the open-world aspects of the game, but I am disappointed that the Jedi meditation chambers that serve as puzzle dungeons are nowhere near as visually, mechanically, or narratively interesting as the ancient temples in the first game that served that same purpose. That leads to there being more of the world to explore, and none of the world is bad or anything, but none of it is as good as those temples from the first game. I will point out that I really appreciate the quality of the in-game map and how it shows you closed off areas that you do not have the proper abilities to access yet. That, alongside of fast travel being implemented in between meditation points, and mounts being included, makes exploration much more accessible and fun this time around. Obtainable map upgrades later in the game that show the location of collectibles also adds to the accessibility of exploration. Character customization has been expanded also this time around. Instead of having only 3 skill trees, you now have 9, one for each of the 5 lightsaber stances, with each having its own unique abilities, 3 for your different Force abilities, Jedi Concentration, Telekinesis, and Confusion, and 1 for your base stats, such as Health and Stamina. For the average player's first playthrough, I highly recommend figuring out which 2 lightsaber stances that you favor and using those throughout the game. I say this because on the average playthrough, you will be able to max out 2 of the lightsaber skill trees along with much of the skill trees covering your base stats and Force powers. Experimenting with the different skill trees to figure out what playstyle best fits you is made much easier by the fact that you can reset your skills at any time. The first time that you do this, it's free, and after, it will cost you 1 skill point. This is an idea that I absolutely love because it opens up much more customization options. The last thing to mention before we move on is the game does offer New Game Plus. This works exactly how you would expect. After you beat the game, you can start a New Game Plus with all the skill points from your first playthrough having been refunded, all skill trees available, and new lightsaber colors being unlocked. So, let's move on to our final statement and review score. This time around, we're going to do this the true after-action review way of doing things. We're going to name the sustains and the improves. So, the sustains: interesting dialogue with side NPCs gives the world character. Expanding the combat from the first game was really great. The expansions to customization were also very nice. Moderately sized open world map to explore is awesome. Some of the improves are that the story was not as impactful as the first game. They definitely could have done with a better main villain and make it so that we can use the blaster all the time. Rework the difficulty for the bosses would be important. because of the inconsistency, and then also improvements to the open world, making it as interesting as those Jedi temples in the first game, I think would be some improves for a third game in this franchise. I really did like this game. I liked the first one. I often, whenever I talk to people about Souls-like games, I've often said that I don't like them so much, not because of their mechanics. The mechanics are great, but they're not narratively driven, so it's like, I can't get immersed into that, But the Jedi series, Fallen Order, and now Survivor, offer us a Souls-like game that also has a narrative structure and is driven narratively, and it's in the Star Wars universe, so that's awesome. So for my final statement and review score, I am going to give this game a rating of one thumb way up above average. This was really good. It's definitely worth your while, and I hope that we get a sequel, because like I said, there are some things that are brought up here, and I don't want to spoil it, but they're brought up here, and then it makes you go, wait a minute, they didn't fully explore that. We've got to come back to that. So hopefully they do that. And I'm excited for it. So I just want to say thank you guys all for watching. God bless you all, and may the Force be with you. Don't forget to check me out on Twitch and join the Discord, where you can voice chat with me while I live stream, and you won't be recorded or anything on YouTube and Twitch, so that's pretty cool. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. If you like to read, you can see my after-action reports on my blog. And if you are interested, you can get some merch from my spring store. The links for everything are in the description below.